Welcome to The Culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are The Culture. Hi, and welcome to another edition of The Culture. I'm your host, Jessica Garrett Modkins, and I'm so happy to welcome our guest this week to the broadcast. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Steve Gallen.
Hey, Jessica, how you doing? I miss you guys. I miss you guys at The Culture, but I first want to continue to commend you for the tremendous work you're doing. I've had an opportunity each and every Friday to watch many of your broadcasts with the team. You all are staying on top of the issues and really providing a tremendous platform and voice to the voiceless and to issues that are relevant to our people and relevant to our culture. So I'm glad to be back. I'm no stranger. I'm not a friend. I'm part of the Culture family. So
That's right.
Glad to be back.
Yes, it's so appropriate. We just celebrated our 100th broadcast on Friday. And happy to say you were one of the first, if not the first, guests that we had on the show. So it's so appropriate to begin this next 100 broadcast talking to you about the wonderful things that you're doing with MDCPS and how it affects our children.
Yes. Glad to be back. And it's a lot that's happened since we last talked. So I'm looking forward to catching up, talking about what has happened, what is happening, and what we are looking forward to happening in the very near future. So look forward to a very engaging conversation as always, Jessica.
Yes.
We represent the culture.
Yes. Now we're going to get right into it. Miami-Dade County Public Schools is conducting currently a virtual listening tour throughout the next month to get input from students, parents, and community stakeholders on strategic plans for the next 5 years. Now, your listening tour was on this past Wednesday, and you were quoted as saying that MDCPS is planning on opening in full this fall, but there are questions about whether or not some components of distant learning will be incorporated. What does that mean as a whole for MDCPS?
Well, first of all, I want to talk about the listening tour. It was a tremendous opportunity this past Wednesday to have an opportunity to engage the community and the stakeholders relevant to not only the current status of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, but what Miami-Dade County Public Schools, its vision, its mission, and its educational and operational outcomes will be for the future. I was the board member that brought forth the item that addressed the strategic plan. Our plan had expired in December, to my chagrin and to the chagrin of my colleagues, which led to unanimous support for the item to get this process started. And I was very, very adamant about the board being engaged in this particular process, not only through the listening tours, but to understand every phase and every facet of the strategic plan's development. This is not the superintendent's plan. This is not simply the board's plan. This is not the district's plan. This plan belongs to the people of Miami-Dade County Public Schools and all of its relevant stakeholders. So this past Wednesday was once again an opportunity for us to receive input, to hear the voices so that we can be a part of that particular process. We also had our initial retreat this past Tuesday as a board and as an administration to really start to flesh out some of the key components, to continue dialogue and for us to come up with a plan that belongs to the community, but more importantly, that really speaks to the issues, the challenges, but also the opportunities for our children. As it relates to next year and what distance learning will look like, we understand that we have rapidly moved forward to try to get students back in school, to transition into what we know is the best and most effective modality for teaching and learning, and that is in-person instruction. But we also know that the pandemic has taught us a number of things, and that is there's no one-size-fits-all delivery for education. And parents at the end of the day are able to make educational choices for their children. So we do anticipate that although we want to move as safely and as rapidly as we can, as safely and as rapidly to a very effective delivery model, which is physical learning, we also know that there are still unanswered questions out there that at the end of the day, our parents are going to have to make those decisions and make those choices for their children.
Yes, and this is a countywide initiative. This is not just in District 1 or 8 or 9. It is countywide. And then we'll also post the link where if you're not able to participate in your respective district, you can take the survey to provide your feedback on where you stand as a parent, community leader, or child, a student. Also, Steve, congratulations. You proffered a accountability for nearly $1.1 billion. Tell us about that.
We were very excited to be informed. Shout out to our Congresswoman, Frederica Wilson. She called actually when we were in that board workshop. She called me and shared the great news. I was able to announce it to my colleagues at the board. And the next day, I thought it was critically important that the board takes leadership. The board provides direction, and the board ensures transparency as it relates to an unprecedented allocation of revenue from the federal government, which is $1.1 billion for our children, our schools, and this community of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So yes, in the past, things have moved rather quickly as related to the infusion of resources coming from the federal government. So we were in many cases playing, I don't want to say catch up, we were trying to reconcile purchases and needs and expenditures that were already determined because everything happened so quickly. K-12 was an example, obviously, that was something that we had to walk back, but the board was not involved in that particular purchase and that selection at the onset. So with the infusion of $1.1 billion, the board needs to lead. The board needs to ensure that direction is provided to the administration, direction is provided to the superintendent, and that there's an opportunity for the community to understand our policies, our positions, and our practices relative to how we plan to spend this money. I will say parenthetically that it is critically important that we are diligent about spending this money because that amount of revenue was predicated on the greatest needs of our children, that money was predicated on the fact that we have a significantly high percentage of students that come from poverty, that come from tremendously challenging backgrounds. So this was a revenue source that was intended to close the gap amongst the least, the last, and the lost. So as caretakers, as the elected officials, and as the ultimate accountability entity of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, it was important for the board to lead. And I was very proud that I received unanimous support on that particular item so that the community will not only be able to witness as we make policy making decisions around the expenditure of these funds, but to also, Jessica, be able to track it on our website as relates to how much money we spent on what over the next 2 years. It's $100+ million each year, which again totals in excess of $1.1 billion for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And we're the largest district in the state, and we're receiving the lion's share of the revenue of the $7.4 billion that's coming across 67 counties in the state of Florida.
So there is a time period as to how the money is allocated. Thank you for sharing that. Now, is there an overview of a direction on how this money will permeate down locally? How is it set up that way, or is that something still yet to be determined?
No, the federal government obviously dispenses the money through the states, and the states obviously have to follow the criteria established by the federal government because it's their money. And their criteria were predicated on indicators that included poverty, indicators that included ELL students, indicators that included homeless students, indicators that included students with special needs. So again, it represented those student populations that had the greatest need, and that gives us an increased educational policy, but also a moral responsibility to make sure that those revenue sources get to the children and their families that have the greatest needs. So that is something that is coming down from the federal government to the state, and that allocation will come from the state to the Miami-Dade County Public Schools to the tune of $1.1 billion.
And then do you determine how it's spent?
Well, that's where we're going to have a conversation about it as a board, as opposed to us being advised. We're going to be a part of the process on the front end because the board has that authority. We have a number of obligations and authorities that we do have, and that is for setting the budget. And this for me is a budget proposition. So the board will take the leadership in consultation and work with the administration, but the board will be at the front leading this particular initiative, obviously in consultation, taking some advice from the experts, but not finding out, not being at the tail end of fiscal decisions and purchasing decisions and programmatic decisions that have already been made, and we're dealing with it on the back end. So we have to have lessons learned, and those lessons learned require that we demonstrate exceptional leadership, courage, and proactivity in this particular process.
Got it.
And the public will be able to see this. So it's not something behind closed doors. If the public wants to know what we're talking about, what we're thinking about, they'll have access through public meetings.
Okay. Next, I want to talk about FSA distant learning retention. Where are we? Well, I kind of know the answer to this, but I'm still going to ask it. FSA and distant learning, tell me how that is going to work.
Well, FSA and distance learning, those are two different constructs, and I'm sure you're aware of it. FSA is obviously the Florida Standards Assessment. That's the accountability that's given on an annual basis by the state of Florida to determine whether or not students are meeting the Florida standards. That's one iteration. Distance learning obviously is a very, very broad context. So I'll start with the former.
I'm talking, my question is, as it relates to those students who are at home, who then have to go in.
Yeah. We're going to talk. Yeah, exactly. So last year, the state suspended all state accountability assessments. The annual assessments were suspended. This year, the state is going to implement the requirements for those to be administered. Fortunately, the federal government, which about a decade ago established thresholds that a school should test no less than 95% of its students. The federal government has waived that requirement. Obviously, it doesn't have that much relevance to the state, but the state has an opportunity to embrace that waiver or reject that waiver and say, you know what, we don't care what the federal government says, we want 95% or above. The state obviously is friendly to the federal government with respect to that, knowing that maybe 95% of the students won't come in for distance learning reasons and for parents being able to make those educational choices. But this year, the state will not be suspending the assessment. So we will be having assessments. What that actually looks like in terms of sanctions for students, student retention, graduation, promotion, school letter grades, that is something that's still up for deliberation. There's a strong advocacy effort to ask the state not to administer any consequences to students, to schools and communities that have challenges when the data comes forward, but the assessments will be moving forward. As with everything, parents have a choice. We as a school system have to honor and respect the statutes that are on the books and administer those tests that are required. But obviously, parents have an opportunity to make a determination as relates to what's in the best interest of their children with respect to safety and related issues. So we will be administering the tests. I think the tests are important because it will give us a sense of where students are, but I do not support the outcome and the data from the test to be used for negative consequences, school grades, student retention, promotion, etc.
So I guess that speaks to the bill that is up in the House as well as the Senate.
Yes. And there are a number of efforts, not only the bills. The Miami-Dade County Public Schools has taken a number of board items to support those positions. So we are in support of those bills that are asking for school districts and schools and students not to be sanctioned, if you will, for student performance outcomes, teachers not to have any negative consequences to their annual evaluations or to their compensation, because we know we're in unprecedented waters. But we do concur, or at least I concur, that assessments are important, but it's how you utilize that data is what is up for debate. And we are advocating that that data does not be used for any negative consequences to schools, to teachers, to communities, but most importantly to students.
Okay, and then as it relates to high school sports, where are we with that?
We're still moving forward with high school sports. As you know, we last year I took a strong position as relates to the Florida High School Athletic Association. We did get through a season with some of our schools participating in the FHSSA state championship series. Miami Central did come back with the championship. It was one of them that does come to mind. But a lot of our schools competed in the Tri-County championship series, and that was a great test run as it relates to what would a different entity look like, a different organization that is predicated of Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and related counties. So we're still up to that exploration. However, the state has recently released its new classifications that are consistent with what I called for years ago when Miami-Dade County Public Schools ran the table after I called for the reclassification of our schools, in which we won 7 out of 8 football championships, which caused a lot of consternation at the state level and quite frankly across the country. So we're still persevering and moving forward. But obviously the pandemic has caused a great degree of trepidation, but it also required us to recalibrate how we look at this particular situation. But we are moving forward. Our athletic programs are up and running. Very, very proud that one of the items that I proffered was to make cheerleading a sport in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And guess what? In our very own District 1 Carroll City Senior High School's girls cheerleading team went and competed for a state title. They didn't come home victorious, but it was a tremendous first step for us to have competitive cheerleading as a sport for our young ladies at Carroll City Senior High School representing District 1 and quite frankly Dade County to go up at the state level and compete. So our athletic programs are moving forward.
Nice. And then how are you doing? I saw you got vaccine. You got your vaccination.
Yeah. I got my first shot. Want to lead by example. I didn't want any special treatment, any VIP, any clandestine administration, if you will. So I went to the North Dade Center right here in District 1, right here in my community with my stakeholders and my residents, and went through the process, stood in line, and got vaccinated. We have to lead by example. So I thought it was important that I demonstrated my commitment, my resolve to stay safe, to become vaccinated, so that it would assuage many concerns that many of our community have, especially from the Black community, where there's a lot of trepidation, there's a lot of distrust, and there's a lot of doubt. So I wanted to lead by example. My arm was sore. I went with my left arm. My arm was sore for the first 24 hours, but right now I'm doing great. All is well, and I'm looking forward to my second shot during the first week of April.
Nice. Okay. And then, Steve, before we go, I want you to close us out. What's next? What's on the horizon? Please let us know.
You know, I'm very excited about the two things that you brought up, the strategic plan. That's critically important as it relates to how we're going to shape and frame the future of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. You know, previously I did an item dealing with the achievement gap. Although we are very, very proud to eliminate all F schools in Dade County, and definitely no F or D schools in District 1, no F or D schools in District 1 after 4.5 years ago when I got elected. We had the highest number of F schools, highest number of D schools. We have no F or D schools. But we can't stop there. I recently brought an item that dealt with the achievement gap and looking at how our students are performing as compared to their white counterparts. We still are in double digits. We still have a ways to go. And I felt that this was something that was not discussed as broadly and as deeply as it should have been as a school district. And I did have the support of my colleagues, unanimous support, where we're now going to take a deeper dive and look at that from a policy position and ensure that each and every year we look at the achievement gap relative to how Blacks are performing as it relates to their white counterparts, and also how Hispanic students are performing. And Black and Hispanic students continue to perform below their white counterparts. Hence, the achievement gap continues to linger in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, as it does across the state of Florida, as it does across the nation. But we're Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We have to be bold, we have to be proactive, and we have to be deliberate and intentional about addressing those particular issues. So the achievement gap is a critically important body of work. I mentioned the strategic plan, and the last thing that you talked about moving forward is how we're going to leverage for the least, the last, and the lost within the framework that the federal government under the Biden administration intended, is that we provide $1.1 billion of resources to our most needy students in our most challenging schools and communities and families. So that is the work looking forward, definitely to get our schools open very safely and securely. We're looking forward this year to physical graduations. That's going to be something that we're looking forward to at least bring us another step closer to normalcy. And as always, we're going to look forward to being transparent, to being open, and to being accessible to our community stakeholders, because at the end of the day, you elect us and we work for you. So again, thank you, Jessica. I do it for our communities. I do it for our schools. I do it for our children. I do it for my very own Zoe, my grandchildren. But at the end of the day as well, I do it for the culture. I do it for the culture.
Thank you, and we appreciate it. As always, you have an open door here. If ever you have any announcements that you like to make, please let us know. I would love for you to come on sooner rather than later. It was too long in between the last time we talked. I'm telling you, we can't let that time go by.
And so many things have been happening. I regret that we didn't keep the momentum going, but you know what? It's not how we start, it's how we finish. And we know that the journey continues, and we're going to continue to make this journey together. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you real soon, Jessica, real soon.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Gallen, and thank you all for joining us for another edition of The Culture. Make sure to tune in tonight for my 2 cents at 6 p.m. right here on The Culture, and it'll be a great time. Come back and join us. Thanks again.
The Culture is produced and owned by Hip Rock Star Media and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent by Jessica Garrett Modkins. All rights reserved 2020.